This presentation is going to be about how to respond to prompts via discussion board. If you follow the simple steps in this video, your responses will be organized, well written, and thorough. Sit back, take some good notes, and enjoy.
So there are some steps you can take to make sure your discussion board response is good and complete. First, print the prompt out. You always want to have a printed out prompt before you start. After you print it out, read the prompt. After you read it once thoroughly, read it again, much more carefully the second time around. Next, scan the prompt for keywords and phrases to see what your professor is requesting. Look for some of these verbs like describe, explain, analyze, elaborate, compare, illustrate, contest. These verbs will help you understand exactly what the prompt wants. Highlight all the keywords and underline all of the questions in the prompt. Oftentimes the prompts that were given ask more than one question. The keywords and phrases will help you identify exactly what the prompt is asking. Once you begin coming up with a response, frequently look back at the prompt to ensure you are responding to all of the questions the prompt asks. The first steps in any writing assignment are to brainstorm and outline. Jot down ideas that you might have and consider how you plan to organize your response. Using keywords and phrases, free write and brainstorm the content for your response. Be sure your ideas are relevant and that they are directly responding to the questions the prompt is asking. There are certain ways you can maximize your discussion board response too. First, type your response in Microsoft Word or in some other Word program. Then paste your final response into discussion board. If you type in discussion board, you could lose your work. Discussion board does not save any material until after it's submitted. Also, discussion board does not have spell check or grammar check like Word does. So it'd be really helpful if you typed it in a Word program first. That way you can make sure your spelling is correct. Now, grammar check doesn't check for all things. It won't catch everything, but it sure does help. Once you're finished with your response, read it out loud to yourself or to somebody else. This will help you hear many grammar and sentence level mistakes. Carefully proofread the response before you submit it. After, you're going to create a thread, paste it into Blackboard, hit submit, and you're done. Let's give it a try. Now that we have the prompt printed out in front of us, let's read it over. What do you think the director of the documentary, Enron, the smartest guys in the room, wants people to know? In other words, what is one of the main points of the movie that the director might want people to think about or share with other people in their life? Use a specific example from the movie to present your reasoning. Briefly describe the impact of the Enron Corporation on families using the micro level of analysis. Additionally, use one of the other 3 levels of analysis. Use examples for each of your points. What is your reaction to the movie? Choose one level of analysis and explain what needs to change on that level in order to avoid the same thing from happening in the future. Now that we've read the prompt once over, we need to take a much closer look. During the second reading, you should highlight the key words and verbs discussed earlier. As you read, identify all of the questions the prompt is asking. As you're going through, it would be really helpful if you jotted down ideas. Let's break this prompt down. What do you think the director of the documentary, Enron, the smartest guys in the room, wants people to know? Well, that first question is pretty basic. Let's go on. The second sentence begins with "in other words." We know then that this sentence is going to clarify the first. In other words, what is one of the main points of the movie that the director might want people to think about or share with other people in their life? Use a specific example from the movie to present your reasoning. Now we know that we need to pull one specific example out of the film to support our claim. For the first part of this prompt, we want to jot down notes below. First, it's asking one of the main points the director wants people to know, not what is a documentary about. Be careful with that. Then, we need to pull one example from the film to support our claim. That's all the first part of this prompt is asking. Let's go down. Briefly describe the impact of the Enron Corporation on families using the micro level of analysis. This is very specific here. It's asking briefly describe the impact of the Enron Corporation on families using the micro level of analysis. Additionally, use one of the other 3 levels of analysis. Use examples for each of your points. In this case, we know that we're going to have to use 2 levels of analysis in this response that we're coming up with. One level is the micro level. Another level is any other of the 3. We also have to use examples from the film to support each of those points. What I would do at this point is then jot down below a few examples that you might pull from the film. At this point, you want to be sure to write not only the micro level of analysis, but also you need to pick that other level of analysis that you're going to use in this response that you're coming up with. Use examples, so you want to make sure you have examples from the film that you can refer to. Before moving on, make sure you get those ideas out. They don't have to be complete sentences, they don't have to be neat, but you need to write them down somewhere. That way you know that you're responding to what the prompt's asking. What is your reaction to the movie? Choose one level of analysis and explain what needs to change on that level in order to avoid the same thing from happening in the future. Well, the first part of this, what is your reaction to the movie? That's a pretty basic question. Now, the next part involves a little bit more thought. Choose one level of analysis and explain what needs to change on that level in order to avoid the same thing from happening. In this case, we are choosing one level of analysis, and then we are explaining what needs to happen.
Before we take a look at a good post, let's go ahead and take a look at a poorly written post. We should have the discussion board prompt in front of us. The prompt asks, what do you think the documentary wants people to know? The bad post begins with, the movie said that Enron lied. We can see that here. The movie said that Enron lied. Instead of focusing on the director as the prompt asks, the student makes the movie itself the subject of the sentence. This sentence does not answer the question. The following example given is vague and unclear. You'll see that here. They lied on all 4 levels. What levels, first of all, are the student referring to, and who lied, the movie or Enron's executives? If the latter, there are no examples of what they lied about. Then the student evaluates the film instead of continuing to answer the other questions asked by the prompt. We can see that here when the student simply says, it was pretty good. It might be okay for you to evaluate the film in a discussion post, but here it's off topic and it's not relevant. The student continues to discuss ideas that are not relevant to the prompt. I mean, everyone lie, though so you know can't be helped on any level. The sentence structure is very messed up here. First, it's obvious that the student didn't proofread. Let's go on. The student finishes with another evaluation, but they did a good job overall. This would work better if the question was, what were your opinions about the film? But they're not. Overall, the post doesn't answer any of the questions raised by the prompt. Note the lack of discussion of levels of analysis, the impacts on families, what needs to change, or any specific examples from the film. The bad post doesn't work because it doesn't respond to the prompt properly. Also, you have to use specific examples. This is not even to mention the grammar, the spelling, and the sentence structure concerns. A lot of these issues could have been eliminated simply by typing the response in a Word program and then carefully proofreading the response before posting it and submitting it to the teacher. As you can see, this post really falls short of what the prompt is asking of the student. Let's take a look at a good response to that Enron discussion board prompt. First of all, the question begins with, what do you think the director of the documentary wants people to know? The good post begins with, I believe the director of the documentary wanted to expose the corruption within the Enron Corporation. The first sentence clearly answers the first question raised by the prompt and uses some of the same keywords. The student continues this pattern of response. The prompt states, what is one of the main points of the movie the director might want people to think about or share? The student then gives an example and uses the transition for example. We can see that right here. The student follows this transition by a brief description of a scene from the film to support the claim. The student finishes with, I think the director wanted the audience to get mad at those types of things so that we will not let them happen again. Let's continue. The second part of the prompt asks students to describe the impact of the Enron Corporation on families using the micro level of analysis. Additionally, use one of the other 3 levels of analysis. The student states that the film provides enough evidence to do a multi-level analysis and states she will focus on the micro and macro levels. The rest of the paragraph are examples of those two levels using moments from the film, again, following the prompt structure exactly. The end of the prompt allows the student to react to the film. What is your reaction to the movie? But it also asks for more critical thinking in addition. Choose one level of analysis and explain what needs to change. The student responds that the movie made me mad. The student then points out the macro level is what they think needs to change, and she gives clear examples of this. The good post is good because it responds directly to the prompt's questions, uses keywords from the prompt, has the same structure as the prompt, and uses specific example from the class materials. This is the kind of post that you want to strive for. And there you have it. That's what it takes to come up with a good discussion board post when responding to a prompt. If you ever need any additional help with this class or with any class that requires writing, you're always welcome to schedule an appointment to see a writing tutor in the English Writing Lab, Lake Worth campus. Our website is palmbeachstate.edu/SLC. Once you get there, just click on English. You can easily schedule your appointments online from home, and we're happy to work with you one-on-one. Hope to see you there. Good luck!